Hey, greetings, friends. Jacque Howard here, and welcome to Trenton 365 presents Jacques Reach. Reach is an acronym that stands for Recreation, Environment, Art, Civics, and Health. On each one of those subjects, I'd like to sit down and have conversations with people. And in addition to that, I'd like to bring them on to the show to get some more exposure. But it's also an opportunity for businesses, nonprofits, agencies, and folks who have a cause to come onto the program and share from your own perspective, control the narrative, so to speak, and talk about things, and we can get that out to our networks. And hopefully, you'll get some feedback from that. I want to say thank you to WIMG 1300, New Jersey's oldest radio station, and the television outlets of WPHY and WZBN for having this program. Please make sure that you get a writing utensil and a piece of paper because more than likely you're going to want to take notes. Approximately 30 minutes is not enough time for you to grasp all the information that's going to be shared with you. And with the grasping of that information, it builds community when you go back and you talk to others and you follow up with my guests and say, hey, look, I heard you over Jacques Reach or Trenton 365 over in Jersey, and I want to learn and want to hear more. That way we can manifest this different mindset so that we can all start being more communal and that we can think about things from a human perspective. I say that specifically because the next guest that I'm bringing on is a new friend. I mean, I've been in his back pocket for about a month now. I've been following his stuff on social media. I've been listening to his podcasts, etc. I am absolutely more than going down the rabbit hole with the subject of aliens, aliens, orbs, UAP, unidentified aliens, the different terminology, etc. And like many things, when I go into them, I go into them from a beginner's perspective, saying, hey, I don't know anything about this, what should I do? And that is how I met Stephen Diener, who I'm going to be bringing on. So Stephen has a podcast called Unidentified Alien Podcast. Now, this is trademarked, so you're going to find it exactly how I said it. Now, his program was right in lines with what I feel and what I'm doing with Trenton 365 and my other outlets. He brings people on, he has an open conversation, he talks about some different things from a perspective of saying, hey, I don't know, I have questions. Let's get some experts on. So with that, it caught my attention immediately. And I've been watching his videos. I've been listening to his podcast. Big shout out to those who are on Spotify. You can find Unidentified Alien Podcast on Spotify. You can go through the hundreds of interviews and things that he has on there and just listen to him on repeat. You'll get an understanding of where he is with this perspective. But more importantly, the professionals that he's bringing on, people who've had life and lived experiences, and people who are in the military, who are in a portion of our society that many people don't know about what's going on. So having those individuals come on, talk about their experiences, also with his curiosity to talk about that, it provides this awesome space where people can have a conversation about things that may be taboo. It may feel like, it's space age, it's science fiction, but this is happening right now. This is happening right now today around the world. And we're also going to talk a bit about what's happening in Jersey, where I am. All the talk about the drones and things of that nature. So sit tight, buckle in, make sure that you get yourself a writing utensil and a piece of paper. Follow up with me and Stephen later if you've got questions, etc. With that being said, Stephen, that was a bit of a long monologue, but I had to get this out, man. And I do want to say this publicly. I've been listening and watching so much of your content and the folks that you bring on that I feel like I know you all already. And I'm excited to learn more, to hear more from your perspective, but then also say, hey, what's going to happen in society? Like, are we going to find out something big about these drones? Are we going to find out that, hey, I don't know, some manufacturer is doing a trick, or this is the government, or it's an Iranian mothership off the coast of the Atlantic coast? I don't know. But I want you to get in and start just talking a bit about, how this captivated you as a young person, and then how you got to the point where you said, hey, I'm going to start a business with this, and then how you go about selecting who's going to come onto your show.
Yeah, for sure. Well, first off, thanks for the introduction. It's awesome. I appreciate that. So thank you, Jacques, for having me on and for being open to the conversation. Yeah, like you said, UAP, Unidentified Alien Podcast. It kind of just started as a side interest for me when it came to this discussion. We all have our things in our lives, our work and everything, and paying the bills and trying to provide for the family and all that. And this isn't something that I really ever expected that would necessarily help with that. It was just something I was interested in. Um, and one day, as I started to get more into the subject, and probably around 20 years old, I started to get more into the subject a little bit. Because as a kid, actually, I was actually quite scared of it. I was yeah, I always tell the story that like when my dad would watch the X-Files, I would like run out of the room as soon as I heard the do 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 do. Like, oh
Yeah.
no, the X-Files is on. But as I got older, it started to intrigue me. I started having questions, and like I said, around 20, I started to kind of hear more stories, dig into some things. The Philadelphia experiments, the stories about Edgar Casey, of course, ancient Egypt, and all these different subjects that really caught my attention. And that turned into really a like this insatiable thirst for more and more knowledge, for stories, for facts about this subject. So I started watching documentaries, I started watching all these different shows and taking notes. Like I would write notes on my phone, and that ended up turning into like a span of about 8 years of me taking notes turned into UAP. And I never expected that. It wasn't my plan. Um, I kind of always thought just, I would think to myself, why am I writing notes? I actually asked myself that question. Why am I writing this stuff down? What am I going to do with this? I always thought one day maybe I'll write a book. I don't know. Like, I don't even know why I'm writing this, but it turned into a resource to where when I started UAP back in July of 2021, I was able to go back to that and say, okay, I'll start here, you know? And so that was kind of the genesis of UAP was just bringing up these stories that maybe you're familiar with, maybe you're not familiar with, presenting the details and really leaving it up to you in the end to figure out, okay, what did I think about that? Is there something to that? What else could that lead to? What questions do I have about that subject? So it's I'm very thankful that people have enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed putting it out there. Because 3.5 years later, it's been pretty wild.
When you talk about the length of time that you've been doing it, um, you look like you're much older than 20 years old. So with that, I assume that you've been doing like, had interest in it for a while. But the amount of content that you've been able to amass in a short amount of time is amazing. I know that you've got a background in traditional, radio.
Right.
You know how difficult it is sometimes to have poignant conversations with people that you feel comfortable enough with cataloging. And you've done that. So kudos to for you for the business side of things and also for maintaining this structure. Because I mean, I think looking in, I think the average person is going to think that you've been doing this for quite some time by how it's been designed. So kudos to you for that. You touched on, when you were younger, how your father used to, watch X-Files and how that music, and I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah.
It still comes on like some of the local channels over here. When I
Right.
hear that music, it still like kind of grabs your attention
Sure.
immediately. So, you talk about your dad, like he was into X-Files. Was it just like from a perspective of a science, or was he someone who, had some interest in UAP and UFOs?
Yeah, he was always interested in it as well, actually. And I think back on that, some of the shows that I started watching or documentaries would be because he would put one on.
Mhm.
So I really have him to thank for kind of sparking my interest in this because he was always kind of interested in it and he would watch news stories about it. I remember the Phoenix Lights in 1997 when I mean, that was a massive national story, really international. I mean, before Twitter, before even AOL chat rooms. I mean,
Mhm.
people would talked about the Phoenix Lights around the world. That was all over the news because it was such a public mass sighting. So I remember seeing that on the news as a kid, and so he's always just had on some type of different show. And eventually, I started gravitating toward it as I got a little bit older.
Mhm. And I want to stick with that because that's also part of what I want to make sure that people understand that, like, you're doing amazing work. You bring on amazing guests, et cetera. I'm sure they have lives and people in their lives as well. Can you talk about the importance of having like family or support system around you and what yours looks like?
Yeah, for sure. It's everything, man. Like I'm sure you can attest to it. It's literally everything. Without their cooperation and support, it's completely impossible to do this because I have two small kids. My son is 10, my daughter is 7, And when I started UAP, mine is 3 years. So they were really a lot smaller when I first started it. And it was tough, when you have a 4-year-old daughter at that time when I started this. It's like, Daddy, come play with me. I'm like, I got to do this. I'm sitting at the dining room table because that's what I did for the first couple of years. Was I would just sit at the dining room table and I would write. I would research and I would write about a story, maybe something like Rendlesham Forest, for example. That was the
Mm.
very first episode I did, were the sightings, the event of Rendlesham Forest back in 1980 or 81 in the UK, and episode 1 of UAP. And I was like, well, I know about Rendlesham Forest. I know about Jim Pennington and John Burroughs and all these different things and who the witnesses were. And then I started like, well, I should probably at least get more details. And then even a story I felt I knew by heart, as I researched more, I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much to this. So it was just things like that as I would research and write. If it wasn't for their, again, cooperation and support, where they understood that, okay, Daddy needs a 2 or 3 hours, and my wife the same thing. Hey, guys, leave Daddy alone for a little bit because he's got to do this. So literally, without them understanding what this meant to me, it would never have gotten done because I always try to put them first, as a father should. So without their, I guess, blessing is maybe the best way to say it, I would have never even done anything with UAP, quite
Mm.
honestly.
I'm glad that you said that, and I'm glad that you were so specific that this is not something that anyone can do by themselves. From the back end of the broadcasting team, having that technology, making sure your content is getting out and you're doing some sort of management of that content, whether it's on social media or different platforms, you need someone to do that. And to be able to do it in a comfortable space where you can get on the air and have a conversation with someone and not be concerned about what's going on the side. That all comes across on the air. So kudos to you for your show, for all your guests. I really enjoyed listening to them, and I can't wait to continue to share more of them. And for those of you who don't know, Stephen has said that he's willing to come back on in the future, is talk about different things that are happening in his circle, but also what's going on in society with orbs and drones and sightings and so forth. And with that, Stephen, I'd like to pivot and talk a bit about your background of where we currently are. And I'd like for you to start with the orbs and then how the terminology was changed to drones, and
Sure.
then touch on what's going on with the drones in New Jersey. And I'm not going to let you go anywhere until we talk about Miami Mall and we talk about Las Vegas as well. Okay. All
For
right. So,
sure.
so the orbs and the drones and things of that nature first, please.
Absolutely. And you put it perfectly, actually, orbs into drones. And I say that because if we go back to December of 2023, Langley, Virginia, Air Force Base. Now, when we hear Langley, Virginia, some of us might think about CIA headquarters, right? And so I always think about that first. I say, well, geez, if something's flying over Langley, what are they looking for over the CIA? Somebody spying on the CIA. But there's also a pretty major Air Force base over there. And in December of 2023, pretty much a year ago from today, um, they had these glowing orbs flying over. Now, keep in mind, that's how it was originally reported. And the Daily Mail in the UK reported on this, and it was reported as glowing orbs, a prolonged sighting that went on for 2 or 3 weeks. Sound familiar, right?
Mhm, mhm.
And this was happening again just last year. Eventually, that glowing orb report turned into drones. Fast forward, and so that was the terminology they started using to describe the Langley sighting last year. Again, that lasted for about 2 to 3 weeks. Fast forward to this year, November, late November, for about 2 weeks or so over the UK. 3 Royal Air Force bases, joint bases between the US military and the British military, where they had these glowing orbs that were reported as drones flying over these Air Force bases. Now, keep in mind with these, this is a very interesting case. Okay, again, all happening before New Jersey, of course. When it comes to the reports out of the UK, I've been told on a couple separate occasions that that's different. What people are seeing there in the UK is actually different than what we're seeing in New Jersey. In the UK, it was really more of the glowing orb type. In fact, they even scrambled F-15 jets on numerous occasions over Lakenheath Air Force Base, Royal Air Force Base. And those F-15s would try to engage with these glowing orbs or drones and would not be successful. They also tried to use a couple of different means of taking these things down, which were not successful. And it was a very interesting case that was happening there that eventually tapered off. But then it evolved into New Jersey, and we started using the terminology drones. Now, New Jersey is really interesting because some of these cases, they really do look like drones, right? I mean, you see the green and red blinking navigation lights. It's unmistakable. And I do believe that we've had cases of mistaken identity. I think it's important to mention that. In some cases, you people get caught up in the story, and quite frankly, they see an airplane and they
Mhm.
think it's something else, right? Because you're caught up in the moment. That has happened. But in other cases, people are really seeing something. And there are actual glowing orb sightings over New Jersey, in addition to the mysterious drones. So I think that's where the connection needs to be made.
Hmm. All right. So when we talk about, is there a possibility then that what we're seeing are two totally different things? Or do you think, from your experience, do you think that the technology is there where these orbs have the ability to change into something else?
It's a great question, and it's something that I've wrestled with myself. Now, to address the second question first, is it out of the realm of possibility that some type of advanced technology could have some type of morphing capabilities? No, of course not, right? If they, in theory, if they are traveling across the eons of the universe, then if that is the origin, then sure, they can most likely have some type of morphing technology. I personally think, just from the information that I've gathered, it's more likely that we're seeing two different things here.
Hmm.
It seems like we're seeing some type of, and I forgive me if I'm getting ahead of things, but it seems like we're seeing some type of advanced U.S. technology
Hmm.
that is pursuing these orbs. And that's kind of where I've landed over the past 48 hours, even. Like, if you had asked me this question, Jacques, 3 days ago, I might have said something completely different. But because of the information that I've gotten, really, I'm not even kidding you, within the past couple of days, some new information that I got from a couple of the sources that I've had on UAP before, people who are really dialed in, plugged into the intelligence side of things, have had private conversations with me. And forgive me for not being able to go into more specifics. I've been asked not to go into some specifics of this. But because of these conversations, I've been able to come to the conclusion as of today that what we're seeing is some type of advanced U.S. technology, the mysterious drones, that are being used and lied about from the U.S. government, uh, to say that nothing's going on. These are just hobbyists. And they're being used to pursue and investigate the actual orb phenomenon that's taking place.
Hmm. Okay. Thank you for that perspective, because I know I had a few questions. Um, if it is the government and they're looking for something, why are they only doing it at night? Because
Correct.
you would think and this is something that, I believe I heard you talk about, like if it was that much of a threat, then it would be all hands on deck. Let's get to the solution. Let's make sure that the proper people and folks know, then let's go ahead and go that way.
100%. And I've really tried to do my best to vet all the scenarios because people always say, well, what is it? What's going on? I think the better way, and the way, at least, I hate to say better like it's like judgmental, but the way I try to look at it is, what isn't it? So that
Hmm.
we can try to have some type of process of elimination. And what I've been able to eliminate, at least on my end, from the information that I've received, is that it's not adversarial, and the I hate to say, take out the UAP side of things completely because it still could be. Maybe it's completely that, but it's just not where I'm landing anymore. And it's not adversarial, and it most likely is some type of advanced tech that is not being used. This is the other angle that I've eliminated. It is not being used to hunt down some type of dirty bomb or loose nuke or anything like that that has been placed by someone who wants to do harm to the United States. And I say that for a couple of reasons, just to touch on the nuke side of things first. I was given a great example where someone told me, again, in a very knowledgeable position, where they told me, I've spoken to people on the WMD side. It's their job to keep track of these things and to investigate them, or if something goes missing. And he said, he related a conversation to me. He said, dude, what's with this nuke thing? He's like, I don't think that's the case because of XYZ, but what do you say? Like, you're in it. It's literally your job. He said, we're not searching for nukes. And he said, well, how can you be sure? And the guy on the nuke side of things said, because if we were, I would be in a skiff 24/7, locked in meetings until we found it. And instead, I'm just sitting here talking to you, having a conversation about it. So that's coming from somebody directly from the military side of things.
Mhm.
So that's really confirmation for me. Also, just a couple of the other things, like they wouldn't use drones to sweep for it. Most likely it would be more of a ground game in conjunction with helicopters. It would also be in conjunction with state and local authorities.
Mhm.
That is not happening. You would have state and local authorities working with the federal government and then coming up with a cover story to hide that they are searching for nuclear material. And as we know, there has been no cover story. They've actually seemed very confused from the start. So we've been able to eliminate that, I believe. The other side of things, as far as adversarial, everything I've been told about adversarial, everybody thinks of China. China is so advanced. I've been told that China is essentially just one giant copy machine. And they just have more manpower. So it seems more advanced because they have 10 times more people working on something than we are at one time, but they're just copying something that we have or another country. So if essentially I keep saying what I've been told, they name the episode what I've been told. They sound like a broken record. Um, if we don't have it, they don't have it.
Mhm.
So that sounds egotistical, like, uh, cocky American type thing, but that's coming from intelligence sources that I speak to. That's what they come across. So essentially, if it was China or Russia, they would have to be stationed somewhere.
Mhm.
If it was off the coast, and I use that as an example because we hear about these things coming off the water, coming to shore. We've actually seen videos of these things coming from the water offshore. The Coast Guard has reported that. So this isn't just, Joe down the street saying, crazy Uncle Joe, hey, I've seen it come out of the ocean. These are things congressmen are talking about. These are things the FBI and the Coast Guard are saying they're coming from the water. If they're coming from the water, that means they're over U.S. waters on their way to the shore, on their way to the mainland of New Jersey, meaning they would have to be at least 100 miles offshore if it was a Chinese or Russian submarine that are launching these things from the water, meaning they would be taken down over U.S. waters by the Navy or the Coast Guard. And none of that is happening. So a lot of these things just aren't adding up. I also asked about the point of Chinese farmland. Now, there were reports, this is a fact, that the Chinese have purchased swaths of farmland throughout the United States, in some cases, farmland that are close to sensitive military sites. And so there's been theories that, well, that's where they're stationed. They're coming from there. But that would remove what we're seeing with our own eyes, which is they're coming from the water. And I've also been told that they're not using that land to launch drones against Americans. So very long-winded answer, but I want to give you in detail everything on that end of what it isn't.
Mhm. All right, well, great for that. I mean, that's a good update. What I'd like to do in the short amount of time we have is just have you talk on a couple of historical things.
Sure.
One is the Miami Mall,
Yeah.
and then I'd like for you to finish up and talk about what's going on or what had taken place in Vegas and your conversations with Scott Roy.
Yeah, for sure. The Miami Mall is, man, that is a an enigma. Really strange. To this day, I mean, that's almost a year ago now. It was New Year's Day 2024. And as you know, for anybody who doesn't know, I'm down here in South Florida. I'm about an hour north of Miami. Um, so I'm familiar with that mall. I know the area. And at any given point in time, you have a massive crowd of locals, people traveling south from Fort Lauderdale or Palm Beach, and a massive amount of people from other countries who congregate in that area. It's a melting pot, as we know. And the biggest point I make about Miami is that with a melting pot crowd like that, you are going to have cell phones. You're going to have social media posts, videos. The thing that has always got me about Miami, Jacques, we never saw one social media post. Not one. And there was barely any news coverage on it down here. And when I tell you that the news in South Florida loves to sensationalize everything, and I barely saw any reports of that. The only reports we saw were something about teenagers setting off fireworks. And because of that, it's caused this panic, and people thought there was an active shooter situation, and people ran out of the mall, and it caused this massive police response. I personally have never bought that. There were some videos out there that people say from the news helicopters showed some type of 8 or 9 foot alien being. Other people say that it was a shadow of police officers walking. I never really knew what to make of that. But I do know, just from a common sense standpoint, the law enforcement response did not match the report. If you have teenagers fighting in a mall and shooting off fireworks, you would not have the federal, by the way, federal and local response that you had that night in Miami. I've never seen, and forgive me, the only time I've seen a response like that was 9/11. And I hate to bring that up, but that's the only time I've seen a response where you have that many police officers and federal officers circling one area for teenagers shooting off fireworks. It was very, very odd. And on the Vegas scenario, so Miami kind of remains unsolved, but it's still very odd. Oh, one more quick thing, if I could, on Miami. There was a video that was verified to be real that wasn't very talked about very much when it came with Miami, where it was a son of a police chief in Miami, and he had his buddy film a FaceTime call where he called his dad, the police chief, as a prank. They were going to put up on social media. Say, hey, film this. I'm going to call my dad and ask about the Miami Mall aliens. The son calls his dad. Hey, Dad, what can you tell me about the aliens? There were aliens at Miami Mall, right? And the dad was not taking it as a prank. He took it super serious, stone-faced, and you see him on the FaceTime. The dad, unfortunately, as a police chief, didn't know he was being recorded. And they ended up posting the video online, and he told his son, yeah, I can't talk about that. And the son got serious then, too. He's like, oh, okay, why? Like, what happened? I can't talk to you about that. Don't ask me about that. And so what was supposed to be a prank turned into suddenly a serious conversation. That's what we know about Miami. Still very odd to this day. Now, Vegas has a lot more details. Vegas was Angel and his family, about, I want to say 6 or 7 people. And this goes back to May of 2023, I believe, if I remember correctly. It was around the time David Grush came out, May or June, right before the first congressional hearings as well in that summer of 2023. And we heard these reports of 8-foot aliens. It's on a 911 call where the teenager of the family, Angel, is making this call and saying there's 8-foot aliens in my backyard. What? So the 911 operators, I think it's a joke, but they say he sounds serious. He sounds scared. The police come out. And the only reason I think this was taken seriously was because we saw in the police dash cam video the green streak go across the sky of Las Vegas that night. Now, typically, a green streak like that, and I'll be the first one to say it, would point towards some type of meteor or maybe even a satellite, space debris, space junk, something burning up in the atmosphere, becoming ionized, makes the green color, and that's what it was. But this one was a little bit more odd. It kind of had another piece or two that came from it, which was found by Scott Roeder. You mentioned Scott Roeder. So we were familiar with the Las Vegas case. A lot of people didn't know what to make of it. It made national news. These 8-foot aliens in the backyard. That's where people left it. Fast forward to earlier this year. Scott Roeder is a crime scene reconstruction expert. He's worked on some pretty big cases. George Floyd being one of them. He's worked on a lot of murder cases and things like that. So he's the real deal. And that's what really intrigued me about Scott Roeder. He's done international cases. He's flown to Australia, Japan to work on different cases. So when I heard that this crime scene reconstruction expert was looking into this Las Vegas case, my ears perked. I'm like, I got to reach out to this guy. Well, 3 episodes later, where he and I spoke, he was able to use his expertise and computer know-how to take the raw video, by the way. A lot of people forget that. The raw video that was taken by the mother of the family of the backyard that night, not doctored in any way. That was the first thing that Scott found out. This video was not doctored. The shadows that we see come across the fence are not doctored. And their response to what they're seeing in the backyard was very real.
Mhm.
Family there. So he was able to take this video and go frame by frame, painstakingly, and actually come up with freeze frame pictures
Yep.
of what look like aliens.
Yep.
There's no other way to say it. So when you see some of these pictures, and I'm sure you can refer to, where maybe somebody can find that on my Twitter or the episodes and things like that. It's on YouTube under UAP. It's startling. And I remember when he showed me those pictures, I'm like, oh my gosh, maybe there really were aliens in this backyard. And I feel bad for the family because they don't want to talk about it. I've tried to get them on UAP before. They're done. They believe it was something spiritual. Angel and his family, and what really intrigues me, and I'll finish with this detail. Um, they're a spiritual family. They're a Christian family. And they sat in the house and described, this wasn't reported on the news, but they described hearing footsteps. They said what sounded like 1,000 footsteps on the roof.
Mhm.
And they were so scared. And they started praying. And when they started praying, they felt like it went away. Like the sounds stopped and if they felt like it went away. And they even became frozen in fear at one point when they were in the backyard. And they started praying and they became unfrozen. So they felt like they were dealing with something in the spiritual realm. And for that reason, they don't want to talk about it at all. It makes them very uncomfortable. They don't live in that house anymore. They
Mm.
don't discuss it anymore. Scott Roeder actually talked to them a few months back, and they said this is the last time we're talking about it. So something very, very strange happened that night, Jacques, that we got physical evidence from, and it remains to me one of the strongest cases of possible alien encounter that I've seen in investigating all this.
Mhm. And I'm going to let you close out on that because I think that that's spot on. And listening to you and Scott talk, during the interviews, the multiple interviews, hearing you both discuss back and forth, you can hear in your voice like the curiosity and the professionalism and the skill set that he has to break things down. Something that I took from that was the fact that it appears as though there were multiple types of beings that were there of varying sizes. And that's not even talking about them by the heavy equipment like the bulldozer, etc.
Right.
I know you said the family, Angel and the family, is not going to talk about this anymore. Is this something that Scott feels as though he's done with his investigation, or do you think that there's more that he's going to do?
He's leaving the door open to it, at least to discussing it further. But he does feel like, and actually, I just spoke to him a few days ago, probably not on the show or anything, just phone call. We keep up with each other, um, and he's pretty much done when it comes to the investigation part of it. He feels like he's given all he can to the investigation. He's uncovered everything he can, but he's absolutely still open to at least discussing what he's found, if that makes sense.
It sure does. It sure does. And part of that discussion, not only with him, but also with you, is to have you come back onto the show and to talk about some different things that are going on. I'm going to keep my ears and eyes open here in Jersey for more about what's going on with the drones and potential orbs. But I would definitely like to have a more of a conversation with you about the spiritual aspect of things. I mean, I know that you're a very spiritual person as well. You're strong in your faith. And that's something that we have to discuss as well. I mean, if these things are extraterrestrial or if they're some sort of a spiritual being, like you've said on your show on several occasions, what does this mean for religions around the world?
Right.
Is this something that now, we've got to revisit, what the Pope has said and what others have said, or is this something that is just going to have a lot of people just pivot totally from what we've been taught of as far as faith?
Yeah, I think it is. Personally, I think it is the discussion when it surrounds this topic because I believe it answers a lot of questions, or at least it could, if we can connect the common threads. Um, so that's always been something to me, as you know, that is it weighs on my mind. How does this all fit together? For sure.
That's awesome. All right. Stephen Diener, UAP Alien, excuse me, the Unidentified Alien Podcast. The links and stuff will be up when I share this. Thank you so much. We'll talk, I guess, in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, whenever you'd like to have me on. Sorry for giving such long-winded answers, but I hope I hope it works. So
No,
thank you for having
it
me.
worked perfectly, man. I'm looking forward to having more conversations with you and developing our friendship. Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
All
Thanks,
right,
Jeff.
Pete. Have a good day.
You too.
And there you have it, folks. Just another opportunity for you to hear some of the wonderful folks that I've been blessed to have come into my life and to share an expert opinion and provide stuff that I don't have. And quite frankly, I'm fine with that because I know that we need this as humanity. We need more communal work. We need more communal conversations, and to work together for the betterment of everyone. Get in touch. My name is Jacque Howard. Remember, it's always about justice, peace, and humility.